we should take cues from kind of who we are and lean into that and not try to be anything else. And paired with that, I'd suggest folks look at the moments in folks' lives when they're highly mobile, when they're most likely to make decisions. Either make decisions to go, to leave, and that we need to focus on retention, or make decisions potentially to move in to a new place.
That's the voice of Hilary Doe, Chief Growth Officer for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. It's a trailblazing role designed to champion the state's comprehensive talent attraction and retention efforts, which have led to results like seeing 65% of Michigan counties grow last year and moving 40,000 people down the marketing funnel to a place where they say they're interested in living and working in Michigan. Stay tuned for tips to inform your own strategy and learn some things you may not know about a very cool state. Learn more about this podcast at livabilitymedia.com. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome, Hilary, to Inside America's Best Cities. We are super excited to chat with you. You look like a total rock star when I was researching you for this interview, so I've been excited about it for a while.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to be talking today about all things Michigan. It feels like you all are everywhere from a town attraction standpoint, just doing all the things. I think it's a great example for other states and other communities, just really hitting all the marks and kind of being everywhere. So we're going to be talking through that a little bit more, some of your strategies, and hopefully have some really good takeaways for folks in our space. Can you start by sharing a bit about, I know there's a strong statewide approach for you all, which I do feel like is a little bit unique to have that statewide approach to talent attraction. How did that evolve? Talk us through that journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, that it is a little bit unique. And I have had the honor over the last year since I was named Chief Growth Officer, and Michigan's the first state in the nation to create a role like mine. So you were, I guess, sort of trailblazing in that regard. But since I took the role on, I've had the opportunity to talk to Michiganders, across our state. And it's so evident when you have those conversations, the way in which this is so critical as a foundation to our own economic strength and resilience. Our rural communities, this has been, folks, they've been canaries in the coal mine for a long time in communities across the country who may have lost young adult population or have a aging workforce, for example. So kind of irrespective of your way in, the foundation is talent and building communities where our talent who's already here want to stay and build their futures. And hopefully when you've done that as well, sharing your story so you can be a beacon to folks across the country who might want to come and join you. And I really do think there's a place for everyone. So I don't think it's an inherently competitive, task. I want to be in it with my partners and peers across the country, identifying each of our distinctive competencies and what stories we're telling and what our policy strategies are to really grow our states to the benefit of all of our residents.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the competitive nature not necessarily being a problem because there's something for everybody, right? Different communities, different areas can appeal to different people, and having that little space for everybody to find their spot and, live their best life wherever they are.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's absolutely right. And again, when you do talent work, or at least the way that we're thinking about it here in the state, and this may be a bit unique, there are a few different buckets. There's sort of like three pillars, I suppose, to our talent work. We think about it from a policy perspective. How do you make the product that is our great state a better and better place to call home, leveraging public policy, right? So that might be everything from, pre-K for 4-year-olds, which we passed here in the state, or community college access for all high school students, or transit investments, housing investments, those kinds of things. And again, that makes, the product better and better, one, for all of our residents. We launch pilots and programs to help ensure that our residents get connected to the right industries and where there are open jobs, to make sure that we're supporting our communities and their talent attraction and retention strategies. And we do marketing. And each of those things is really critical for our, whole story and to move the needle on and in achieving our goals. But what's the result of doing all those things to the point about it being not particularly competitive? I think the result is a better place for the folks that are here and a better place for all the young people that are growing up in our communities. First and foremost, a retention strategy, right? Where we're building, robust communities that are lively and, really livable. And if that also means that folks across the country are attracted, great, and inevitably some of our folks might want to go try something else on too, right? But I do think that there's something that's inherently positive about leaning in and doing that talent work, even for the folks who are already here.
Yes, I love that because I think a lot of communities face, and I don't know if you all do or not, but I know a lot face locals kind of being like, "What do you mean you want to bring more people here? We already have plenty of people." But you make a good point about those efforts that go into that thought process. Like it benefits everybody, even if you're born and raised
Absolutely.
where you're living and are still based there.
Yeah. No, I've had great conversations along those lines. I had the opportunity to talk to now over 20,000 Michiganders across the state, in addition to polling, 6,000 plus young people across the country. And some of those conversations certainly have started with, you can grow Michigan, but don't grow it here. Absolutely. But the construct of those conversations is, hey, we're going to sit here together and really allow our local communities to let us know what growth looks like to them. And with that foundation and that like kind of construct for the conversation, I've never gotten to the end of one where we didn't get to a really good place. Some places are poised for growth and they really want to attract as many folks as they can. And in other places, it's, really a sustainable community. They might need nurses and teachers and strategic attraction, for example, or retention. And then that's what will help them do.
Yeah, so the needs are different depending on the place, definitely. Talk more about some of your overall goals in your role. I believe you've been in it for a couple of years. So, some of what the specifics of some of the efforts you all have been engaging in.
Yeah. No, I've been at it. Yep. I started at the May of 2023. So it'll be, I guess, 2 years here at the end of the month. But we've launched over the course of that time. A nationwide marketing campaign called You Can in Michigan. Folks can kind of check out what we're up to at themichiganlife.org if they're interested. And part of that campaign, of course, is storytelling and shifting perceptions about what it's like to live here in Michigan. But we've also launched, as part of that, a Michigan career portal. And I always mention that to folks because I think it's an important piece of the puzzle where we list to date over 140,000 open jobs are listed on that portal right now. So that when folks come to our site, they get to make their decision informed by the big three, I call it. So they want to find great places. They can use a quiz on our site to look at communities across Michigan, more, places with beautiful natural beauty, vibrant cities, and really find something that works for them. They can find great opportunities through the career portal to get connected to some of those open roles. And they can find, all the aspects of our communities that are welcoming. We have a cost of living calculator, for example. We have ways to connect them to programming, including our recent Make My Home program, which is a first in the nation talent retention and attraction program that helps folks interested in relocating or choosing to stay with down payments, student loan forgiveness, really locally tailored program benefits to help talent make their decisions about where they're going to call home. And our campaign is really intended to help folks make holistic decisions, which are going to require them to think about each of those different elements all kind of in one place. So folks can check that out there. And that's been a real success. In only about 18 months, we've had over 40,000 people come through that campaign and say, yes, they're interested in living and working in Michigan. And, that's a big number to get all the way from the millions of impressions all the way down the funnel and say, yes, this is an action that they want to take. So that's one of the things, I'm most proud of.
Yeah, that's an impressive result. And I think we had another Michigander on the podcast recently. She was actually sharing that you all had just recently, as a state, moved into some plus percentages of people coming in, which was amazing.
Yes, no, that's been great to see. So, in tougher times, in sort of 2008 to the 2012s, Michigan and a lot of places during those times of a little bit of economic uncertainty, we're seeing lots of outmigration, right? I mean, in a given year, Michigan saw 50,000 folks, unfortunately, leave the state looking for opportunities or, different things in tougher moments. And so I mentioned that only to say how far we've come. Since we started this intentional effort, we've seen consistent growth over the last three census releases. 65% of Michigan counties grew last year, so it's really happening across our state. The city of Detroit has grown the last 2 years, and that was the first time in 50 years that was true. So we're seeing it really, catch up in our biggest cities. And I think most importantly to underscore, and I would encourage my counterparts in other places to look at this metric too. When you just look at total population, you can kind of lose the what do they say, forest for the trees, or what have you. And I really like to look at our young adult population, or our working age population in particular. Because long before you'll see population declines, you'll see labor force challenges, right? Because folks retire and you need folks to, fill those seats. And so when we look now at our young adult population, it's accelerating in growth faster than 45 other states. We're in the top 5 in the country now. And that was just not always the case. And I really think it's the result of this being a group project. Tens of thousands of Michiganders have been involved, and of us taking this holistic approach, acknowledging that it's going to require policy change. It's going to require intentional partnership with our universities, our strategic employers, new teams like our talent action team at the MEDC that, builds programs for our fast growing industries like semiconductors and others. And it's going to require real storytelling and marketing, because you can't make all those changes in the dark. You have to let folks know, what you have to offer, and tell your folks in state and across the country.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue to something I definitely want to talk about, which is that branding, storytelling, marketing piece of this. At Livability, a lot we say like town attraction is really marketing, right? Because you can be doing all this cool stuff, nobody knows about it, not really going to help you. So would love to hear your perspective on that and kind of what you've seen some of the most effective marketing approaches be.
Yeah. Well, we've tried, a variety of things. And I've been really surprised, frankly, at some that have been the most effective. We have a national campaign that has really been well received. And like I mentioned, that's, 40,000 plus folks have come through it. So we're proud of that. But in addition to that, we've also tried really targeted outbounding strategies, for example, leveraging systems like LinkedIn to outbound to the alumni of Michigan universities, for example, who might be all across the country, or who might be in specific industries where we know we have a lot of open jobs and our strategic employers want support in helping fill those roles. And when you do something like that, I wondered, hey, will folks think this feels like spam, or who knows?
Yeah.
But we really tried to use best practices of making that communication feel as human as possible. It's coming from my face, and we've received really only positive feedback, and 70% plus open rates and click-through rates on those kinds of messages, with folks letting us know, hey, you know what, I am sick of XYZ location that I've been in for a certain amount of time, and I do miss Michigan. So I would I guess suggest trying to borrow from industries industries to be more on the vanguard of some of these strategies that maybe folks have historically used for outbound sales, or other things, to think about telling your state's story in addition to the broad-based traditional campaigns and out of home and commercials and things like that. And that's really served us well.
Yeah. Any unusual tactics you could talk about there? Like, I know I read about the roadshow pop-ups. I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting one. If you could talk about those or others that you feel like are a little creative.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you thinking that's creative. I hope so. We're trying it. We have done all kinds of what I would call experiential marketing. And it's really based in data. I would underscore that. We aren't doing a pop-up for a pop-up's sake, or a roadshow for a roadshow's sake. We're really looking at the data that tells us where Michiganders have moved to over the last couple generations, or where folks are moving to our state from, and have a really nuanced sense now of the archetypes of folks who are moving to different parts of our state, so that we can really speak directly to them. And then leveraging that information, we chose to run some field trips, for example, across our state, where we had students from our universities load up on buses and come visit our big cities and our natural beauty, and help them make their decisions on where they were going to call home. And we also planned some strategic road shows in places like Houston, for example, where, especially in Southeast Michigan, a lot of folks have moved to Houston over the last, couple generations. And so they have some connection to our place. And we hosted a pop-up there in partnership with a community partner called Black Tech Saturdays. I think they're the preeminent ecosystem for Black and Brown tech founders in the country. And we did it during Afrotech, and we just told Detroit's story, as best we could, because that's where Black Tech Saturdays is based. And, as a result of that, we had over 1,200 RSVPs, tons of folks really interested in what we had to offer. And over 80 of founders, as a result of those roadshows, chose to purchase their own plane tickets and fly to Michigan to come to the next Black Tech Saturdays event. And because that community is so important when you're growing a company, for example. And if we have it on offer here, then maybe that's where folks want to be. So I think those kinds of out of the box strategies that do a good job highlighting who you are and leveraging community partners can be a great way to do that. Can really be effective, even when the call to action is as high a bar as buy a plane ticket and fly on up.
Yeah, I love that. I see what you were saying earlier about kind of taking strategies that you would use in any marketing context and thinking about how you can apply it here. So what we were just talking about reminds me of like trade shows or conferences or those types of things, but then it's like how do you use that to reach talent and sort of thinking about ways to do that. So
That's absolutely right.
I
Yep.
love
And I
that.
think we can borrow from lots of industries. And again, I for a long time was president of a tech company, and I often find myself applying those kind of principles in this context. The policy work is product work. The product is our great place, and we can, as we get a better and better product, it'll be easier and easier to do our marketing. So all of it really should work together in a virtuous cycle that helps us drive growth long term.
You talked about some archetypes that you've noticed of
Yeah.
the types of people that go to certain parts of the state. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What some of
Yeah.
those look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really interesting to witness, and again, I'm sure this looks a little bit different for everybody, but here in Michigan, what we've seen, especially again among our young adult population, I'll zoom in on that, are a couple different trends. One, the west side of our state historically has been strong for growth, and as in terms of total population, they've been some of the fastest growing communities in the state. And that's because of, good, strong economic growth for some time. But in addition to that, we've noticed two kind of emerging trends. One are in northern Michigan and the west side of our state. If you didn't know already, Michigan has 3,000 miles of coastline, 20% of the, world's fresh water around our state. So really, really beautiful beaches and great natural beauty. And we've noticed more and more folks, especially remote workers, moving to Western Michigan and Northern Michigan because they can choose where they'd like to call home, and they're choosing a place that's, really, really beautiful to do that. And so that's been kind of interesting to witness and watch. And those communities have responded in kind. There's a new Blue Tech Innovation Center being built to help attract those workers and also attract startups, for example, in that space to that community. And the other trend we've noticed is the impact of some of the investments we've made as a state in market or in manufacturing in new areas like clean energy, I mentioned, but also in our fast growing tech ecosystem in the Detroit area. And we've seen young folks moving to Detroit and the surrounding communities as those opportunities have increased. And when you kind of look where folks are moving from, our Brooklynites, our LA folks are moving to, Detroit. We see lots of folks from Colorado move to Traverse City. And you can start to get a sense of who these folks are, right? I moved actually back after I was a boomerang. I grew up in Michigan and I lived in New York for a while and moved back to Detroit. I call us our city mice. And then, you might have folks who are in Colorado for the natural beauty who are choosing Traverse City as their next stop. So I think it's really important to start building those personas and applying them to your growth strategy.
Yeah, I love that. And from a retention and boomerang standpoint, um, it's interesting what we're seeing because I think there are plenty of people thinking about the last couple of decades even that like actually wouldn't have minded staying like close to family or where they grew up, but maybe those opportunities just weren't there. And it seems like we're seeing that opportunity actually spread out a little bit more and be a little more available. Maybe that's just because I'm more aware of what's going on now, but in those smaller to mid-sized cities, which is really cool. And just with the weird environment we're in now with inflation and costs and all of that, I think it's also getting a little bit harder for people to be as mobile, which, could be I guess if you looked at it from keeping your community like sticky for people, could be a good thing.
Yeah, if you can connect your talent that to opportunities locally, yeah, folks will take advantage of it. Especially if you've done a good job doing that listening and building a policy environment and communities that are reflective of what folks want and need. What you were just alluding to, for what it's worth, bears out directly in data. Since 2000, we've seen more and more population of the folks moving to places that aren't necessarily the largest job centers in the country, but are places that offer a balance of jobs and also some affordability and some quality of life. A little bit of balance. Michigan has, the fourth lowest home prices in the country. And when we think about our basket of goods and our specific offering, that's a part of it. We want folks to have really great economic opportunities. We want them to have a great amenity-rich quality of life, either from our natural beauty or our, rich cultural offerings in our cities. But we also want to maintain that cost of living and make sure that folks have access to be able to own a home here. For example, we did a national poll asking folks 18 to 34 what would be most motivating for them when they consider a new place to call home. And we threw everything, all the options out there. You've heard of programs that offer cash incentives to move, for example, things like that. We threw all kinds of things. It was spaghetti against the wall, asking folks what they'd be interested in. And the most motivating factor for that whole set was access to a down payment on a home, being able to get closer to home ownership, because folks really do want to have that option. And for a lot of people, imagining being able to get a down payment together is just, beyond their scope currently. And so that was the most motivating. When you controlled for parents, the most motivating factor became affordable or free pre-K and childcare. That was really interesting for us to witness. And when we think about our policy priorities, really important to think about, because each of those things has validity as just good policy, good housing policy, good education policy, but it might really also have validity as good economic policy from a talent attraction and retention perspective.
Yeah, so true. Talk a little bit. I don't think you've touched on this yet, but the talent action team I know is something that has engaged a lot of employers in some of this strategy. Can you talk about what that is, how that's worked? I know you've touched on focused industries a little bit already, but maybe tying that in here if it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our talent action team. So where the growth office broadly in my office thinks about population growth across the whole state and works with our communities to, retain or attract folks, irrespective of, whether they're remote workers or, their industry. Our talent action team is a bit more incisive. So they came about because our strategic employers, who are, for example, fast growing, really need folks with a certain skill set and need to ensure that we have that talent available right here in our state. And so the talent action team has been, I should say, award winning. They've received all kinds of national recognition for being as innovative as they are. And they work directly with our universities and our community colleges to build programs that specifically prepare talent for the kinds of skills they'll need in jobs that our strategic employers are offering. They also have created retention strategies, for example, something called the Michigander Scholarship that's been really popular here, where students can graduate, and if they choose to accept a job here in Michigan with one of those strategic employers, they can get a scholarship that starts to pay off their loans and their tuition for choosing to stay here in state. So that team's been really innovative in how they think about preparing the workforce of tomorrow, really, in K-12 systems and the university systems, and then making sure that they're connected directly to an employer and a job opportunity so they stay right here in state. And so then our employers get what they need in terms of a talent pipeline.
Love that. We talked a little at the top about this sort of statewide approach, but obviously there's a lot of local and regional EDOs and other types of organizations engaged in this work throughout the state. So how do you all stay on the same page? How do they help shape the direction? And how does everyone work together mostly successfully, it seems like?
We actually just recently had a regional talent meeting where, my office and the talent action team pulled together 33 regional partners, economic development organizations, CDCs, and talent partners from across our state to come together and share trends that we're seeing across the state, trends specific to their communities, to let them know who's moving in, who's moving out, where there are gaps in the job market, for example, and to plan together about what their challenges are in the year to come so that we can prioritize our programming in response. I think one of the challenges is that sometimes at the state level, programs will get made and they aren't necessarily, scratching the proverbial itch, right, that folks have locally. And we want to make sure that our work is as much as possible in response to, what folks are hearing on the ground and designed to, help folks tackle those challenges. We've also started to provide more centralized infrastructure because at the local level, folks don't necessarily have the admin budget or the staff, frankly, to support some of these initiatives. So with our most recent program, Make My Home, for example, we're at the state providing the technology, the marketing, I should say the marketing to help them attract folks and retain folks, but then the technology to help them receive applications, qualify those applicants, convert the applications, all of that. That might be really hard and onerous for a local community to do. So, I'd say there's no exact, formula for how to do this well, except to lock arms and be in really close communication and take our cues from the folks that are closest to the constituents they're trying to retain and the folks they're trying to attract. And that's exactly what we've tried to do, really provide locally driven, locally tailored programs and resources.
Love it. So, one more question, and then we'll move into a fun wrap up question. I was thinking while you were talking, we talked a lot about young professionals, students, recent graduates, people in the 18 to 30 or 18 to 35 cohort. And that's something you hear a lot. Like a lot of communities are especially interested in those groups. But what about, you've got also a huge working age population between 35 and 65. And it seems like a lot of times those folks aren't viewed as shiny, I guess. And I would just love to hear, I don't know, your perspective on that. And maybe it's just that when you're in an earlier phase of life, it's just typically true that making changes like moving around is just a little bit easier. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that it will be different for every community who they should target and what what their community specializes in, I would almost say, right? And so we've really tried to encourage communities to build growth plans that are really unique to them. So some communities have the infrastructure and amenities that'll appeal to a certain set and others, to a different set. So I really think we should take cues from kind of who we are and lean into that and not try to be anything else. And paired with that, I'd suggest folks look at the moments in folks' lives when they're highly mobile, when they're most likely to make decisions, either make decisions to go, to leave, and that we need to focus on retention, or make decisions potentially to move in to a new place, right? And so when we're thinking about highly mobile communities, people make those decisions upon graduation. So recent grads are a big cohort. That's probably why people talk about them a lot. But another moment in folks' life when this happens a lot is, call it their second kid, kind of as they're building their families. Folks might make the decision to move to a place where that's a little more affordable, or where they can buy a home, or, that has a different set of amenities. And those folks tend to be a little bit older, maybe in their 30s or what have you, or late 30s, and looking for a new place to call home. That's another moment. And then obviously, upon retirement, and even if those folks aren't staying in the workforce, we should be cognizant of the fact that they can be a talent attractor too. Because as folks look for childcare support and things like that, it's not uncommon for people to move to be a little bit closer to wherever their parents land, to build that family support. It can obviously go in either direction, but that's a relevant thing too, and could be a great strategy for folks. Only other thing I'd mention is there are also highly mobile populations that aren't by age. Like remote workers are a highly mobile population we of course know about, but also veterans are a highly mobile population. And we think about that a lot in Michigan. In Michigan, we want to make sure veterans across the country know what we have on offer here, because they're such a highly talented group of folks, and we have a lot of open jobs. So that's maybe another strategy for some communities that's less age dependent.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I know it's just when we talk about the workforce a lot and some of the demographic issues that might be coming down the pipeline from a workforce standpoint, things like the birth rate is down, a lot of people are retiring, and sort of trying to figure that out. I often have just sort of personally thought that there was just so much focus on younger people, and there's like plenty of people of all age brackets that could use like being retrained in something else, or just like being considered in a different way. So just something that I feel like I've.
No, totally. And when you're thinking about a comprehensive talent program, as we do in Michigan, it's not just a program about growth, right? It's not just about retention and attraction. A critical piece of retention is folks being able to find opportunity in your place. And that sometimes means throughout the course of their life, being able to get connected to a new industry, or get reskilled or retrained in a fast growing industry that maybe didn't even exist when they entered the workforce. And so, if you're going to build a robust retention strategy, it really needs to include, one of my colleagues says, from twinkle to wrinkle. It really needs to include, thoughtfulness about what resources folks will need throughout their whole career journey. And we really invest resources trying to think about how do we reskill? How do we get in front of folks the new opportunities and new job sectors, and invest in those kinds of programs as well, so that, a piece of our retention strategy is a workforce development kind of training strategy.
Yeah, love it. All right, fun questions. Tell us about the tattoo. I read about it in an article about you, and I was like, is that a job requirement for your team? Everyone has to finish
The number of people, I will show you the tattoo. It's on my left wrist. I have both peninsulas on my left wrist. I like to have a little Michigan up my sleeve at all times. But no, it was not a job requirement. I get that question a lot. Folks ask if I got it after I got the job. But no, I mentioned I was a boomerang. I grew up just south of Detroit and went to school here, and then lived a handful of places, but in New York City for most of that time. And while I was living there, I was really, thinking about and trying to get home. And Michigan's always been a real source of inspiration for me. Our people are so creative and innovative, and I was hungry to get home. And so I literally put Michigan up my sleeve, so I could look at it and kind of, think about the future and make sure that, the end game was landing right here. So that's exactly what I did. And it just happened to work out that I also ended up in this role, being a walking commercial for our great state. So I guess it all worked out.
Well, while I don't get to ask every guest about the tattoo they have of their state.
Bummer.
But what I do ask every guest is, so you're based right outside Detroit, right?
I'm in Detroit, actually, right in the city.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what's a bucket list item someone visiting there for the first time should do?
Oh gosh, that's hard for me because there's so much great stuff to do here in our city. One thing I will plug, I suppose, is Detroit is one of the few places where all of our pro sports are right downtown and walkable to each other. So you can walk from the basketball arena to the, baseball stadium to Ford Field. And that makes for such an awesome environment during any season. So if you come to Detroit, I would look at whatever season it is. There's definitely a game. And I would check out what's going on and try to catch up. Detroit just has an incredible sports culture. We broke the record for the NFL draft when it was here recently, and tons of stuff to do downtown. So you can build a whole day around going to a sporting event here.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot of our listeners are going to be in Detroit actually for the IEDC conference.
Oh, great.
Early this fall. So that'll be good advice for them. But thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It was great having you. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Livability Podcast, where we take you inside America's best cities. At Livability, we highlight the unsung awesomeness of small and mid-sized cities across the country. We also partner with communities to reach their target companies and potential residents through digital content and print magazine programs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review this show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also learn more about us at livabilitymedia.com. Have an idea for an upcoming episode? Email me at aellis@livability.com. Until next time, from Livability, I'm Amanda Ellis, sharing the stories of America's most promising places.